Who are you? At this time, even if the Blood Baron's brain was not bright, he could still see that something was wrong. Whether it was Quicksilver or this weird girl, these were all existences that could not appear in the wasteland. And based on the other party's understanding of him and their enthusiastic attitude at the beginning, it can be seen that these people seem to be very familiar with him, but the Blood Baron can guarantee that he does not know these people at all. He stared at Quine blankly for a while, and then a guess suddenly appeared in his mind, and he couldn't help but stammered. Impossible, impossible. The timeline has been fixed for a long time. It is absolutely impossible for you to have the ability to travel through time. Are you not from this world? Humph, you reacted pretty quickly. Kara snorted coldly and threw him to the ground casually. The Blood Baron lay weakly on the ground. He regretted the words as soon as he said them, because he knew that the beings who could travel through the world were not ordinary people, and there might be even more terrifying beings behind them. Although I didn't know what the purpose of these people was, I actually guessed their origins. So in order to keep this secret, I was obviously on their silence list. Don't kill me, please. I was forced to do it. It was Red Skull who threatened me. I am also a victim. Look at me now. Those criminals have abandoned me and my tribe, you have to believe me. The Blood Baron was scared to death. After all, he was not a being like Dracula who could not die in circles. If he died, he would really die. The Blood Baron still cherished his life after living for so many years. Don't worry, we won't kill you. Zhang Yi took 2 steps forward, looked at the Blood Baron and said calmly. Really? Blood Baron raised his head. It's just for the time being. Zhang Yi's eyes were a little indifferent. I need you to tell me all the information about the wasteland. At the same time, I also need a scout force. You are very useful, so I won't kill you. Scout. Blood Baron opened his mouth, but seemed to have no reaction. But I am a villain, aren't you afraid that I will betray you or tell the Red Skull about your situation? In this land without order, I need to make the best use of everything. You have been wandering for so long. Do you still want to live a life that is worse than death? Follow me and I will let you drink hot blood, but betray me, and I will let you experience the consequences of being watched by the sun. As a cold-blooded man, the Blood Baron shuddered for no reason when he heard Zhang Yi's words, and he answered tremblingly. Don't worry, I will never betray you. This is not enough, I will cast some magic on you. I stole some interesting contract magic from Mephisto before. Don't worry, as long as you don't betray me, this kind of contract will not cause you any harm. Zhang Yi smiled. This kind of contract from the border of hell is the specialty of demons. In ancient times, many wizards who signed contracts with demons would study this kind of witchcraft. They transformed the demon's contract into black magic to capture some strength for themselves. A powerful slave, used to protect oneself while practicing. Later, after a long period of evolution, these black magic gradually became more widespread. In modern times, even an ordinary person can learn this kind of black magic to catch ghosts or goblins. But the black magic Zhang Yi learned couldn't be that kind of crappy stuff. He used it as a genuine devil's contract. The reason why Zhang Yi was able to use this ability was thank you to Mephisto. Zhang Yi was tricked by that old monster Mephisto before, and countless demon souls were stuffed into Zhang Yi's body. Although with the help of the time controller, the negative energy of those demon souls could not affect Zhang Yi. But the fragmented information mixed with it still brought a lot of trouble to Zhang Yi. As the saying goes, blessings and misfortunes depend on each other. While being affected by the fragmented information of countless demon souls, Zhang Yi was also constantly learning those powerful abilities that were unique to demons. An ordinary wizard might not be able to learn that kind of high-level taboo knowledge if he spent a lifetime, but fortunately, Zhang Yi controlled huge power at that time, just like adding an advanced information processor to a computer. This made Zhang Yi learn a lot of magic that he could not learn before. Tell me, how did you get here after so many years? In addition, I also want to know the information about the forces of Red Skull and others. These things are very important to me. Zhang Yi said. Okay. He was under the eaves and had to bow his head. The Blood Baron also knew that his life was in the hands of these 3 people at this moment, so he had no other choice but to follow the other party's requirements. After considering his words, the Blood Baron slowly fell into memories. The Red Skull came to me first at that time. He knew that Captain America and I didn't deal with each other, so he hoped that I could join his alliance. After all, our tribe had a certain fighting capacity at that time. Red Skull didn't trust me. He didn't tell me many plans, but I didn't care at the time. At that time, I just wanted those shadow heroes to pay the price, so I led my followers to join Hydra. I am waiting for the day when the final battle comes. Having said this, the Blood Baron sighed heavily, with a sad look in his eyes. At the beginning of the battle, I was assigned to the New York battlefield. It was the main battlefield for villains and heroes. Almost many named beings died there. I thought I would be able to kill Captain America with my own hands, but in fact, I searched all over and couldn't find him. The first hero to fall was Iron Fist. According to the information given to me by the Red Skull, my tribe had a sneak attack on him before he put on his suit. However, he was very strong. It was obviously a sneak attack, but it was delayed for a long time. It was just over, and by the time we walked onto the street, the fighting had already entered a fever pitch. I don't know what was going on outside. I only know that there were corpses everywhere on the street at that time, and countless blood flowed on the ground and merged into the sewers. While I was following the corpses in search of the large army, I saw Baron Strucker head on. He shouted for us to retreat. At that time, I thought our operation had failed. Later I learned that the operation had not failed. The heroes had all already killed. Listening quietly to the Blood Baron's story, Zhang-Yi and the other three had different expressions on their faces, each of them lost in their own thoughts. After a pause, Zhang-Yi asked. Then how did you end up like this? The most critical question is, you obviously control the entire world, why is the earth like this? Sighing, the Blood Baron showed a mocking look on his face. The reason is simple, because of suspicion. Suspicion? Pietro suddenly frowned. Yes, the alliance between the villains is far less strong than you think. The Blood Baron sneered, and then continued to speak. Guess why the Red Skull clearly wants to conquer the world, but now he can only hide here and be the so-called bullshit leader. Even though he seems to be very powerful now, in fact, other villains are just giving he's a man of face, but when it comes to matters, no one cares about him. Indeed, when we came from Hammerfell, what we saw and heard along the way has long been beyond the control of the Red Skull. Pietro nodded and said thoughtfully. That's because in that battle that year, although the heroes were all wiped out, the villains were also seriously injured. Those madmen wanted to use the power of Dormammu in other dimensions, but it was easy to ask the gods to send them away, but it was difficult to do so. The villains had no choice but to fight with those dimension lords again. Hearing this, Pietro suddenly stopped talking. After hearing this, he already knew that the villains had begun to be reckless in order to defeat the heroes. The battle in Atlantis was so tragic. I heard that the entire Canary Islands was pulled into the whirlpool, and everything in the world was in chaos. Things were out of control. If it weren't for the Red Skull and destruction, the Doctor and Magneto stepped up to control the situation, and it is estimated that a larger civil war is inevitable. The Blood Baron smiled sadly, then pointed to the land under his feet and said. Do you know how much I paid to save my little life and my tribe? There were too many evil people who participated in the war. It was impossible for him to reward everyone based on their merits. In order to reduce the pressure, the Red Skull was prepared to reward everyone who could. Those who threatened his position have all carried out assassinations, and none of the evildoers who are still alive today are economical. I probably understand. Zhang Yi nodded. In other words, after the battle where the hero fell, the villains also entered into a period of open and covert fighting. During this period, the whole world entered a chaotic and dark era, right? It can be said that the first 10 years were the most severe period of population shrinkage. Later, when the rulers came to their senses, it was too late. They could only cross the river by feeling the stones to ensure that they had enough resources. Blood Baron replied. Still have a question. Zhang Yi stretched out his hand, took out a batarang from the inner pocket of his windbreaker, placed it in front of the Blood Baron, and asked slowly. You have lived in the wasteland for decades. You must have seen more information and knowledge than we do. I would like to ask if you have seen anything related to this thing somewhere. This is this. The Blood Baron was slightly startled when he saw the bat dart, then took the dart and observed it carefully. The workmanship and material of this thing are first class. Judging from the appearance, it is definitely not a product of this generation. It may be a military weapon from the old era, but this style is a bit. That's not what I'm asking. I want to know if you have ever heard of people who use such weapons existing in the wasteland. Zhang Yi interrupted the Blood Baron and said quickly. Seeing that Zhang Yi was a little unhappy, the Blood Baron immediately stopped watching the batarang, raised his head and thought for a moment before speaking uncertainly. I do seem to have heard some rumors, but I can't guarantee that it has anything to do with this thing. Tell me about it. Zhang Yi crossed his arms. The Blood Baron carefully recalled the information in his mind, his facial features almost squeezing together. That must have happened 3 years ago. At that time, I heard rumors that there was a vampire action in the Lizard Kingdom. The opponent had a bat mark on his chest and was constantly killing lizard people. Are you sure? Upon hearing this, Carla and Pietro suddenly became excited, and even Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows. The Blood Baron was startled by the actions of the three. He took 2 steps back and calmed down before continuing. Yes, the source of the information is an old client of mine. I have a very close relationship with him. He didn't dare to lie to me. At that time, he suspected that there were vampire members living outside who were extremely hungry and would attack those lizard people. Or a daywalker like Blade, punishing evil and promoting good. That's right. With the bat mark printed on the chest, and the bat darts, we can now confirm that there is indeed such a Batman in this world. Zhang Yi felt mixed emotions in his heart. He groaned. By the way, what's going on with the lizard people? Pietro couldn't help but ask. That was the masterpiece of Dr. Lizard Connors. He felt that the human body was too weak, while the lizard people were tall and strong, and had extremely excellent self-healing abilities. He believed that this was the so-called evolution, so he's trying to turn all humans into lizard men. The Blood Baron spread his hands. Then he was driven to the coastal border by the Red Skull. The land there is sparsely populated and the materials are barren, which is very suitable for the survival of this group of deformed products after evolution. Then the person with the bat symbol on the chest is a man or a woman? Pietro asked again. He remembered that Zhang Yi once said that there is also a Batwoman among Batmen. Male, I'm sure. Blood Baron replied firmly, and then looked at the three of them curiously. Do you know him? Is it possible that he is your friend? However, his question was not answered by anyone. Zhang Yi and the three of them looked at each other, thinking about the information the Blood Baron said. What is certain now is that a Batman appeared here 3 years ago, but we cannot be sure whether he is still alive or where he is now. Pietro frowned. And we're not sure if there are others. Kara took over. It's possible that Barry Allen is in this world, or someone else from the Justice League that he's talking about. It's possible, but it's not big. If there are a lot of outsiders coming to this world, then it's impossible that no news will come out at all, unless they are really low-key, but the last time that Batman appeared was 3 years ago beforehand. We must prepare for the worst. Etc. Suddenly, Kara interrupted Pietro's words. She moved her ears, and then her eyes suddenly locked on the Blood Baron. Did you secretly call for backup? How is that possible? All my relatives have been killed by you. The Blood Baron jumped up immediately. Seeing that the Blood Baron's reaction didn't look like he was faking it, Kara couldn't help but speak. Is that someone following you all the way? Could it be the killer sent by the Red Skull? Impossible. Although I can't defeat you, my anti-reconnaissance ability is still very strong. I can survive under the nose of the Red Skull for so many years because of this method. Blood Baron immediately retorted. That's weird. Kara frowned. If it's not for you, then who else could it be for? Everyone slowly shifted their gazes and looked in the direction Kara was looking at. The atmosphere between heaven and earth became eerie and dead, with only the whistling wind echoing on the grassland. Zhang Yi and others all stood up, including the Blood Baron, who also climbed up at this time. His face was gloomy and he looked into the darkness in the distance, as if he had sensed some disgusting aura. In the darkness, a faint sound came from far away. It was like a rat walking through the sewer, or like a rapidly flowing water, which made people feel terrified. The moonlight shined through the slowly moving dark clouds and scattered on the ground. Only then did everyone realize that not far from them, there was a strange figure standing silently at some unknown time, with a pair of eyes staring at those present. 4 people. The other person looks like a little girl. She has dark skin, short black hair and wet clothes. She is wearing a set of shabby clothes, just like a normal girl. But to appear in front of everyone inexplicably at this time of night, it is obvious that this guy is not an ordinary guy. The girl's face was a little thin, and her eyes showed indifference and excitement, as if she had seen something she longed for. I was scared to death. Okay, I was just joking. Who can tell me where this guy comes from? I know there are ghosts in this world, but I didn't expect to see one ready-made so soon. Pete Luo swallowed. She is human. I can smell the sweet blood on her body, but besides that, there is something else on her body. It smells disgusting. Blood Baron curled his lips. Kara, on the other hand, was not prepared to coddle the other person at all. She raised her steps and was ready to give that inexplicable guy a hard blow. No matter you are human or ghost, no matter how scary you look, after you taste the way of greeting from the Kryptonians, I hope you can still maintain this weird state. Don't worry yet. Zhang Yi stopped Kara quickly with eyes and hands. As soon as he saw the other person's face, Zhang Yi recognized the identity of this little girl. She was none other than the eagle-eyed daughter Ashley Barton. However, what Zhang Yi was curious about was that the girl was not there. Hammersher should stay well or compete with Kingpin too. Why did she come back here? If Zhang Yi hadn't acted quickly, this little girl would have been thrown like a discus by Kara in the next second. Ashley, what are you doing here? It's good that you still remember me. I don't want to go to a lot of trouble to introduce myself before killing you. Ashley exuded a cold aura. She showed a smile and looked directly at Zhang Yi. As soon as these words came out, several people present fell silent. After a long time, Pietro, who couldn't bear the strange atmosphere, finally asked Zhang Yi. Do you know this crazy girl? We know each other. Zhang Yi didn't know what kind of expression he should show now, he just felt very embarrassed. Ashley on the opposite side didn't notice anything at all. She just sneered and said to herself. Witch Crow, this is your code name. Don't get me wrong. I'm just confirming it with you because I want to know what kind of tombstone I should prepare for you. Okay, stop. Zhang Yi quickly interrupted the other party's increasingly sinister words. Is there any misunderstanding here? Why do you suddenly want to kill me? When Ashley heard this, the murderous intent in her eyes became even more intense. She walked towards Zhang Yi step by step and murmured in her mouth. It's this look. It's the same attitude as my mother, as if I'm a failure, a worthless waste. I've been like this since I was a child. At least I have the superpower of Spider-Man, but what about her? What about her? None. Compared to me, she is the loser. Pietro and Blood Baron stared at each other. They really didn't understand what this girl was talking about. Kara and Zhang Yi seemed to understand a little bit, but they really couldn't talk to this little girl. What empathy there is. Everyone looks down on me. In the eyes of my mother and those gangsters, I am a dispensable waste, and in the eyes of the rest of the people, I am an inhuman freak. It doesn't matter. Wait until I take your I hope you can still keep this idea when all your heads are screwed off. Ashley, first of all, I don't treat you as trash, I simply look down on you. If you are really proud of the blood of Peter Parker flowing in your body, then you'd better inherit the excellence of your grandfather. Quality, rather than being a foul-mouthed, uneducated guy. Zhang Yi patted Kara's shoulder, then walked towards the direction Ashley came from, looked directly into Ashley's eyes and continued. I know that bad circumstances will change people's personalities. You may be more suitable for the wasteland world now, but this is wrong and abnormal. Just like the world at this moment, if I want to change this world, then you must also gotta change your mind. You are a good girl, and I don't want your future to be the same person I remember. Ridiculous preaching. Ashley turned a deaf ear to Zhang Yi's words and smiled contemptuously. You don't think I can let you go if you just say a few nice words, do you? I know you are a wizard. It's hard to imagine that someone like you can exist after the Red Skull destroyed everything related to witchcraft. I'll give you a chance to take the initiative and hand over the wizard's inheritance. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows when he heard this. Now he knew why this girl came to see him. It turned out that she was eyeing his wizard identity and magic inheritance. Look, these little calves in the wasteland are not afraid of anything. After knowing that he is a wizard, they don't want to provoke him. Instead, they are extremely excited and run over to explode their equipment. Seeing Ashley's confident look on her face, Zhang Yi couldn't help but laugh. What if I don't want to? It's best if you don't want to, so I have a reason to kill you. Don't worry, I won't kill you directly. I know that you wizards all have some magical witchcraft skills. I will torture you until you are willing to hand over your things. Until you come out, I hope you can hold on a little longer and make me happy. Just you. Haha. You have no idea how much power I have now. Ashley's eyes exuded terrifying murderous intent. Zhang Yi sighed. He had discovered early on that there was something on Ashley that was affecting this silly child's sanity. Venom, is that you? As soon as she finished speaking, black sludge-like liquid suddenly surged out of Ashley's body. What followed was a frightening scream. Hail to you, sir. Ashley. Share a joke. Author, I've been stuck recently and it's so uncomfortable. Reader, why is it stuck? I've guessed it, you should write like this next, how simple it is. Author, I just don't want you to guess, so I'm confused. When Zhang Yi saw Ashley for the first time, he already noticed something else lurking in her body. This is something that can affect a person's personality or brain and spirit, and at the same time it has its own wisdom and thoughts. The sense of inconsistency in this kind of thinking stitch is extremely obvious in Zhang Yi's eyes. And since this is the Marvel Universe, Zhang Yi's first thought was of an alien parasitic symbiote like Venom. Now it seems that his guess was correct, and it can make a little girl like Ashley become like this. From the looks of it, Venom can be said to have provided quite a bit of help. Venom is a thoughtful alien life form created by Nar, the god of symbiotes. They basically move in the form of liquid without a host. The necessary condition for their survival is parasitism. On the powerful host, help them maintain their vitality. At the same time, this parasitic relationship does not belong to a single claim. Just like its tribe, they are called symbionts, which means that in the process of symbiosis with the host, they will also give the host powerful powers. Superpower. These superpowers include, but are not limited to, increased strength, speed, reflexes, organ regeneration, and other powerful abilities that are different from ordinary people. It seems that this symbiote seems to be a very excellent existence. It can turn an ordinary person into an extraordinary person. But in fact, this symbiotic relationship is not friendly. Just like Venom, it has its own thoughts. In other words, if you want to obtain Venom's superpowers, you must accept that your body is affected by it at the same time. Another life takes over and controls. Although the Venom will be affected by its host, it will still have an extremely serious impact on the host when it amplifies the desires and emotions in the host's heart. It is said that the symbiote can make good people better and bad people worse, but this is not true. People's hearts are unpredictable. Even the little spider cannot control it 100%, let alone other people. How should I put it? In a sense, Venom is also a poor guy. It itself has no distinction between good and evil, but it is still divided into the camp of criminals. And because of its symbiotic relationship, both heroes and villains are not the same. Be willing to accept it so that it can only become a wanderer in the wasteland. Zhang Yi didn't know how many kinds of creatures Venom had parasitized over the years, but what Zhang Yi could detect was that the current Venom was completely different from the one in his memory. Now it looked more like a cruel and bloodthirsty creature. Of madness, like massacre. But what Zhang Yi was most curious about was how could this guy get together with Ashley and think about killing him if he didn't go looking for trouble with Hawkeye? Could it be that Spider-Man's superpower awakened and Ashley rekindled Venom's love for Peter Parker? It's not that it's not possible. This is interesting. Zhang Yi stared at Venom, who was forcing a smile on his face. He didn't know what to say for a moment. The other person seemed to be afraid of him. When it smiled, it tried its best to turn in the row of interlocking sharp teeth and kept a straight face. The harmless appearance is not revealed. Venom, are you crazy? Ashley looked at Venom with astonishment on her face. She couldn't figure out why this monster with its mouth full of flesh and slaughter had become so cowardly at this time. When you came to me, you said we would defeat all enemies. I have never said this to this girl in my life. Venom didn't even look at Ashley, it just kept showing a flattering smile towards Zhang Yi. Although this smile is a bit unacceptable. We agreed to kill this wizard, and you, expletive, clearly promised me. Ashley gritted her teeth and roared. She threatened me. Venom said quickly. You, expletive. You, expletive. Why did I believe you, you despicable freak? Ashley punched him out of embarrassment, but Venom was faster, and it nimbly dodged Ashley's fist, seemingly with ease. There was no way, who told them to share the same body now? Venom knew exactly what was going on in Ashley's head, including the direction in which Ashley was going to punch. Get the expletive off me. It's not up to you, little girl. Besides, if you want to survive, I advise you to be more honest now. If you make that adult unhappy, you will die miserably. I don't want to lose another spider. Hero host. Venom muttered. It has to be said that Ashley's appearance was quite intimidating at first. Several people, including Kara, thought that some terrifying existence was targeting them. Just when they were preparing for a vicious battle, the atmosphere changed. But it became more and more wrong. Especially when Zhang Yi opened his mouth, Venom suddenly appeared like a bitch. Not only did he not mean to offend him at all, but he was extremely afraid of Zhang Yi. At this moment, several people were directly laughed out of the internal strife between Ashley and Venom. Yeah, she is really a crazy girl. Pietro said speechlessly. The Blood Baron on the side was also a little speechless, but at the same time, he carefully glanced at Zhang Yi, who was also an old antique from the old era. He knew very well that the person who could make the monster Venom fear such a creature was definitely not an ordinary person. In addition, these people come from another world, and their power must be more terrifying than they imagined. Not paying attention to the Blood Baron's gaze, Zhang Yi still looked at Venom and Ashley playing tricks with an expressionless face. To be honest, Zhang Yi is really not afraid of Ashley. If Spider-Man, who has been famous for a long time, comes over, he can survive 2 moves, but this little girl who even has a half-baked spider sense is really nothing to be afraid of even with the little plug-in Venom. Same. Not only Zhang Yi himself, but also Carla and Pietro could not be afraid. Perhaps Ashley, who possesses Venom, can achieve a combat effectiveness comparable to Spider-Man when she explodes with all her strength, but her group is not a vegetarian. Even with the help of Venom, Ashley's reactions can't keep up with Pietro's speed, and her strength is weaker than Kara's, not to mention Kara's heat vision is still the weapon of the tank symbiote, so what chance does she have of winning? It is estimated that among everyone present, only Blood Baron, a veteran gang member, can fight with her inextricably. But Zhang Yi's focus was not on this. Compared to Ashley, Zhang Yi was more curious about why Venom was so scared when he saw him, just like seeing the god of symbiote crawling out of the coffin. There are so many secrets in Zhang Yi's heart that it is almost impossible to share them with outsiders. If there is anything that can make Venom so scared, then the most likely thing is that he has torn an entire timeline apart. One normal universe is still continuing peacefully, and the other contaminated one is preserved in his own. Inside the bottomless pit. But the problem is that this incident is an experience that happened in other universes. The memories that can be retained in that universe can be counted on one hand. Zhang Yi does not think that the Venom of this universe can penetrate its secrets. Although symbionts in parallel universes have a chance of influencing each other, the world where Deadpool massacres the Marvel universe is an exception. That universe is full of cognitive pollution and distorted information. Once this pollution is seen by others, then he will also fall into deep pollution. This is probably why there is no so-called observer in that universe. In other words, the observer in that universe would have died before it was contaminated, otherwise it would not have gradually fallen out of control. So the question is, since Venom doesn't know about other worlds, why is it so afraid of itself? You know, Zhang Yi is just an ordinary dark wizard at this time. Although he knows a little more and is stronger, he is really not as good as those higher-level beings. Such an ordinary person, let alone usually those are Venom recipes, so why is he so special? Moreover, as Venom has been changing hosts for so many years, its original truth, goodness and beauty have gradually been tainted by this dark and chaotic generation. Everything in the wasteland is full of violence and bloodthirsty. It has been affected for so long, and it has probably been affected for so long. I have lost my initial sanity. But for such a being who fell into madness to suddenly wake up when he saw himself, this is something worth pondering in itself. Zhang Yi looked at Ashley, who was still fighting and dodging the venom, and spoke slowly. Okay, stop, I have something to tell you. Hearing this, Venom reacted the fastest, and it immediately stopped its body. For this, it was punched by Ashley. This was the only attack that Ashley hit. Ashley also fell silent after hitting Venom in the face. No matter how stupid she was at this time, she could still see how serious Venom was about this man. To be honest, when Venom came to Ashley and promised to give her unparalleled power, Ashley was excited because she knew Venom very well and she knew all the rumors about her grandfather Spider-Man when he was young. After feeling the powerful power that the Venom brought to her, Ashley was instantly obsessed with the desire for power. She felt that if she could control the Venom, she would undoubtedly be able to do something that even her grandfather could not do. After all, Venom left Spider-Man because he hated him, so he left him without hesitation. But Ashley is not without any brains. After she obtained the Venom suit, she became more determined to kill Zhang Yi, because she felt that if she wanted to completely control the symbiote like Venom, then she must learn magic, otherwise it will be difficult to restrict the opponent. Ashley was right, but she might have found the wrong person. Seeing that Venom betrayed her in one encounter, Ashley naturally understood that she could never be the wizard's opponent in a single fight, and the other party might be much more powerful than she imagined. So after struggling for a while, Ashley gradually showed compliance. First meeting. Venom, your reaction seems to me to be a bit extreme. Zhang Yi spoke calmly, speaking slowly word by word, but the pressure on the people in front of him felt increasing. Really? I think this little act is not enough to express my high respect for you. If you see that nothing happens, I will withdraw first. This wilderness is not safe. Venom shrank into a ball, soft lying on Ashley's shoulder. Don't worry, I'm quite curious about you. In this universe, even Count Nephra and Eyeball Man haven't seen through me. How can you judge my abilities? Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes slightly. The Eyeball Man's observer's eye is now placed in his own magic space. Objects of that level can't detect him. With this little Venom, how can he be able to see through his own aura? This, Venom stammered, black mucus constantly surging. Hearing Zhang Yi's question, even Ashley cast a curious look at Venom. She didn't have Venom's ability, so she naturally had no way of knowing why Venom was so scared. After being frightened for a long time, Venom murmured softly. Although I don't have great power, as a symbiote, I can still distinguish the breath of the host. There are energy residues from at least 6 dimensions left on your body. Maybe you can't feel it, but I can hear the voices of countless demons. The wail echoes around you. My humble guess is that you and your entourage are not from here. The auras on them are very complicated, so complicated that I can't tell whether they are real. The woman's hands were covered with symbiote after she died. The traces left behind, and that male. Listening to Venom's narration, Zhang Yi nodded thoughtfully. It seemed that he was not hiding well enough. It was not that Eyeball and Count Nephra could not see through him, but that they were not qualified to peep into an existence of this level. The eye of the observer does have this ability, but Zhang Yi can imagine that after seeing these taboos that he cannot accept, the eyeball person will be overwhelmed by countless information in an instant. Thinking of this, Zhang Yi raised his head again. What's wrong with men? Zhang Yi knew that Venom was referring to Pietro. He has some other thing on him. I can't fully describe the feeling. It's like he comes from a world outside the world, a reality before reality. Just looking at him, I feel like I'm back. The day the Black Death Sword was forged. But the difference is that when I forged the Black Death Sword, I didn't have the wisdom yet, but now I am sober and experiencing the heart-wrenching pain. At this point, Venom's sticky body began to tremble unconsciously, causing Ashley's coat to become tangled, and the color of its appearance was constantly changing. Upon seeing this, Zhang Yi immediately turned around and looked at Pietro with a frown, his eyes full of surprise. When he noticed Zhang Yi's gaze, Pietro spread out his hands in surprise. He shrugged his shoulders, not understanding what Venom meant at all. His eyes stayed on Pietro's body. Zhang Yi's expression was a little unnatural. Among all the people, Pietro is probably the one who has the closest relationship with Zhang-Yi. He is not only a companion who has been following Zhang-Yi since he first crossed over, but also a relative who has shared the joys and sorrows with Zhang-Yi for the longest time. Pietro and Zhang-Yi had a fateful friendship. If Pietro was lost, Zhang-Yi might not be able to escape from that universe. The two were close brothers who knew everything about them. Zhang-Yi put almost all of his trust in him. But now, the words from Venom's mouth have cast a strange veil over Zhang-Yi's original knowledge of Pietro. Miss Time, can you find anything else on Pietro? Zhang-Yi called Miss Time in his heart. Please wait while checking. Inspection completed. No abnormality was found. Do you want to check the Soul Light film of Pietro? No. Zhang-Yi frowned, and he couldn't help but ask again. Is there really nothing abnormal? Maybe there is something attached to his spiritual world or somewhere else. Sorry, I didn't find any record that the body, soul, and spirit of Pietro were different from the past, nor were there any traces of erasure, modification, replacement, or contamination. Frowning, Zhang-Yi pondered for a moment and tentatively asked Pietro. Pietro, you haven't experienced anything weird since we met, right? Pietro was stunned when he heard this. He didn't understand why Zhang-Yi would listen to the words of a creature that looked like it was not an organic creature. However, since Zhang-Yi asked, he naturally recalled it carefully. The windmill rotated, and the fragrance of green grass and earth filled Pietro's nostrils. The next moment, Pietro slowly shook his head and spoke with clear eyes. No, I don't know anything. Zhang-Yi didn't answer, just kept silent and lost in thought. Everyone was sensible and did not disturb him at this moment, especially Ashley and Blood Baron. They knew that the topic at this time was no longer something they could fit into. It's best to stay quiet at this moment, otherwise the other person's attention would be on them. The atmosphere gradually became tense after a while. I really don't know anything. Pietro was a little confused by Zhang-Yi's look. Don't be nervous, I will never doubt my brother. Zhang-Yi withdrew his gaze. He could guarantee that Pietro was still the same person in his memory, and there would be no souls from other worlds in his body. However, that doesn't mean there's nothing else about him. Maybe it's the gaze of the upper-level narrator, maybe it's pollution from a higher dimension, maybe it's something else. Zhang-Yi couldn't tell at this time, but he knew that Pietro must have a huge secret, and this secret must be related to the ruined universe and even the time controller. It's time to talk about your problem, Ashley. Zhang-Yi knew that now was not the time to worry about Pietro, so he turned around and came to Ashley. To be fair, I'm surprised you came all the way here. I don't know where you went, but I guess since you are the so-called hero, you should be interested in Osborne, so I am going to come over and try my luck. Ashley was not afraid at all. He looked at Zhang-Yi. I see. Now Zhang-Yi understands why this girl is here, and she can only look at her face. Then what would you have done if I hadn't come here? Ashley clenched her fists and replied. It doesn't matter if I don't meet you, I will kill Osborne and his alliance of villains. Like a superhero. Blood Baron smiled sinisterly. I'm not some bullshit superhero. Ashley's hair suddenly exploded. She glared at the Blood Baron fiercely and said every word. The superheroes have failed. They died in that battle a long time ago. This can only prove one thing, that is, the so-called heroes are bullshit. If you want to kill other villains, you have to become a villain even more powerful than them. So that's what you think. No wonder I always feel a strong sense of disobedience in you. Zhang-Yi smiled, shook his head, and then continued. I don't care what you think, but you should understand that I will not allow beings who understand our origins to live in this world. Okay. If you have the guts, you can kill him. Woohoo. Don't be surprised if the child is ignorant. The venom filled Ashley's mouth directly, and then he shook his head at Zhang-Yi with a smile on his face. Ugh, why are you stopping me? There was no trace of fear in Ashley's eyes, but anger. Shut up, please. Venom felt a little regretful at this time as to why he wanted to have sex with this little girl. This guy's head was bigger than those scrolls who had lost their minds. Don't worry, sir, we will fully comply with your request and there will never be any objections. Really? Zhang-Yi raised his eyebrows. Scout promise. Venom controlled Ashley and said at the same time. That's best. Zhang-Yi nodded casually. It just so happens that I need some manpower now. Although the evildoers in Osborne City are nothing, it is not an easy task to deal with them quickly and without anyone noticing. With your help, things may be simple. Some. Zhang-Yi didn't care what Ashley was thinking at this time, and he didn't care about the little Jojo in Venom's heart. If he wanted to educate such disobedient guys, he didn't need to teach them too much. He just needed to hold them firmly in the palm of his hand and lock them, and people around you will naturally change over time. This may be what people often say, those who are close to red are red and those who are close to ink are dark. Maturity or change never requires any big event to happen. It does not necessarily have to be the death of a person or a car accident. More often than not, you wake up one day, or accidentally see other people's actions, and suddenly figure out something in your heart, and open up the knots in your heart that you didn't understand. Don't worry, Lord Wizard, your loyal slave will be the vanguard of your expansion. It's time to make that damn skeleton pay the price he deserves. Since he couldn't resist, he might as well offer his loyalty as soon as possible. Hearing Zhang Yi's words, the Blood Baron suddenly revealed a ferocious smile. Venom on the other side also nodded repeatedly. The same goes for us. Sir, you know me. I can fully understand my host's thoughts. This little girl has already fallen in love with you. I do not. Ashley opened her mouth, then tilted her head under Zhang Ye's gaze and let out a cold snort. Okay, but only temporarily. It was late one night, and the sky was extremely gloomy and dark. Young Eric climbed into his crib early. He also drank a cup of hot milk before going to bed. This was specially prepared for him by his mother. Because they were moving, Eric's parents would be waiting for him tomorrow. I was going to sell the cow. Eric grew up in Iowa. His parents said that this place used to be a very peaceful place. Although it was not easy to make money, he could barely satisfy his needs. Later, some mutants came here to settle down. Although the two sides were not in conflict with each other, life was not easy. In this troubled world, no place is absolutely safe, but parents who have experienced the past generations understand that if you want to protect Eric's safety, it is best to stay away from these supernatural beings. Even if society is a little more stable now, there's no telling whether those freaks will cause trouble again. Eric's whole family lives in the slums, and his parents are both dentists. This kind of craft might have made a lot of money in the past. But in this era, it is not easy for them to ensure food and clothing. In order to pay the protection fee, Eric's parents have to spend a large amount of money every month. Eric's father was the first to propose moving because during a medical visit, he saw with his own eyes a conflict between a mutant and a local gang member. In just a few seconds, those powerful gang members were torn into pieces, which frightened him. Although those gangs will ask for money from every household and even carry out robbery and extortion, they basically will not kill people. After all, they are just for money. Killing people will only make them earn less, and the gains outweigh the losses. But those mutants are different. They don't seem to regard themselves as the same race as humans at all. Those who offend them almost only have death. Eric's father is a good old man, and his normal character is also submissive. He feels that he will not offend those mutants, but he is worried that his family may be harmed. Every time these people with superpowers appear, there will always be countless accidental victims. Eric's grandparents are one of them. So for the sake of the safety of his family, Eric's father just wanted to take the whole family and leave this place quickly. Eric was lying on the bed. He felt like he was surrounded by huge warmth. This was the place where he felt most comfortable and safe. Every time he was bullied by other children outside, he would hide under his quilt. This feeling made him feel at ease. His parents promised him that as long as he slept well tonight, they would buy him a Daredevil toy that he had always wanted when they moved tomorrow. This made Eric very happy. He closed his eyes early. I just hope tomorrow can come quickly. But late at night, Eric was awakened by his parents' screams. His eyes were full of fear. Although Eric was much more sensible than his peers, he had never experienced anything like this. Quickly climbing out of bed, Eric walked barefoot to the bedroom door step by step. He didn't know what was happening outside, but he heard his father's hoarse scream and his mother's cry. This struck great fear into his young mind. Slowly opening the door a crack, Eric trembled and looked outside. The sound came from the first floor, which is where parents usually live. The second floor only has Eric's own room and a small attic warehouse. With the light on the first floor, Eric walked slowly towards the stairs. Go. He didn't know where he got the courage. The room door was only 2 meters away from the stairs. Eric didn't even know how long he had been walking. He only knew that his ears were occupied by wailing, and his body had long since stopped obeying. When he came to the stairs, Eric didn't dare to go down directly, so he slowly lay down and stretched his head out. What Eric saw next became a lifelong nightmare. I saw a monster covered with long hair pressing his father under him, with razor-like fangs tearing at his father's flesh and blood, while Eric's mother fell to the side, her right arm it was ripped off directly, and it looked like he wouldn't live long. At this moment, Eric forgot to breathe for a moment. His eyes were filled with mist, and tears flowed down unconsciously. He wanted to shout, but he could not make any sound. The fear was at this moment filled his heart. He forgot how he got back to the room, and he also forgot how long he cried in the quilt. All he knew was that after what seemed like 100 years, the local mounted police found him and took him out of bed. The mounted police still sympathized with the little boy Eric, but this was the way it was in this era. No one was absolutely safe. Eric's life experience was, in a sense, very common. Due to the existence of supernatural creatures, the case could not be solved. The mounted police were unwilling to cause trouble, so they had no choice but to close the case hastily. But Eric was lucky, there was an old mounted policeman who was about to retire who was willing to adopt him. Eric didn't remember what happened that day. He only remembered that when the old mountie took him home, he took out a daredevil doll stained with blood from his arms. It turned out that the parents had already prepared the gifts. Since that day, Eric seemed to have become a different person. He no longer communicated with anyone or smiled at anyone. He closed his heart and engaged in high-intensity exercise every day. Revenge became the motivation for him to live. Eric learned information from the old mounted policeman about the murderer who brutally killed his parents. It was a werewolf, one of the filthiest dark creatures. Legend has it that they had been eliminated by the heroes, but everyone knew that this you can never finish planting things. This kind of monster comes from the purest black magic. Although we don't know what they looked like before, but now, they can no longer be regarded as human at all. Those monsters have superhuman strength, speed and endurance, their teeth are extremely sharp, and their claws can even cut metal. Ordinary people have no way to deal with them, and even the mounted police are unwilling to provoke them. But Eric didn't care, he had only one purpose, and that was to avenge his parents. The cowardly, timid, ignorant, crybaby Eric was dead. He died that day and that night. The old mountie was also a master of fighting when he was young. He knew that Eric was destined to embark on the road of revenge, so he prevented Eric from dying. In order to give Eric a certain ability to protect himself, he began to train and give guidance to Eric. Rick fighting skills. During this period of time, Eric also learned about some of the old mounted policemen's past. For example, he once had a daughter, but she was sacrificed in the battle between heroes and villains. Both of them lost their families. Maybe it was because of this. After a while, the old mounted policeman would adopt him and teach him how to fight. Time flies. 19-year-old Eric is already an extremely strong young man. He has been honing his fighting skills all the time for more than 10 years. At the same time, he also dreams of cutting off the heads of those dark monsters with his own hands. Eric made himself a black suit, which he modeled after the Blade Warriors. He hung the daredevil doll around his waist and chose to take revenge on all the dark creatures in the wasteland. That day was the old mounted policeman's funeral. Perhaps he knew that he didn't have much time left, so the old mounted policeman called Eric to his side one day in advance. He told Eric that he couldn't remember his age. He had lived long enough. Now it was time for him to find his daughter. The road ahead would be difficult, but he believed in Eric. We'll overcome everything. After saying that, the old mounted policeman smiled and fell into sleep, but he never woke up from his sleep. On this day, Eric once again experienced the pain of the death of his family. He stood silently in front of the old mounted policeman's grave for a long time. When the sun was about to sink into the horizon, he made a move. He put on his package and mask, and Eric escaped into the darkness. From today on, there will be no Eric in the world, only Super Killer who is born for revenge. Wandering in the wasteland, Eric left his hometown for the first time. He knew that the road ahead would be full of difficulties and thorns, but he was fearless and embarked on the road of revenge without hesitation. His first kill came from a small town in the west. He heard from a drunk mercenary that a lone werewolf had appeared here. Late at night, in this land of yellow sand, he could always hear the shrill scream. Howling wolf. The local rangers and mercenaries had arranged for manpower to hunt down the werewolf, but the other party seemed to be very vigilant, and several large numbers of people had been hunted by the other party. As time went by, there was nothing they could do against him. After learning this rumor, Eric's calm heart couldn't help but become restless. You know, his parents were eaten by a lone wolf. It would be great if he could find the murderer here. After half a month of visits, investigations and crouching, Eric finally figured out the whereabouts of the lone wolf. In order to make the victory more likely, Eric even brought a highly destructive firearm. But even so, Eric found that he still underestimated these dark creatures. The opponent's resilience was terrifying. Bullets hitting the opponent's body could only make the opponent's actions pause, and could not even cause damage to them. As a last resort, Eric started a hand-to-hand fight with the werewolf with his bare hands, but how could a human body compare to a werewolf? Eric soon fell behind. But I don't know if it's the blessing of the goddess of luck or what. When the werewolf was about to bite Eric to death, he accidentally swallowed a concentrated explosive. The violent explosion directly blew the werewolf's body into pieces. Countless flesh and blood flew into the sky, as well as the sticky blood. Fur. Eric's whole body was covered in blood. He lay helplessly on the ground. There was only endless scarlet in his field of vision. He knew that he had succeeded. He had finally taken an important step on the road of revenge. But at the same time, he also discovered his shortcomings. Although his physical strength and fighting skills were considered very strong among humans, he was still too weak compared to dark creatures. If he wants to kill those powerful beings, he must acquire more knowledge and find the weaknesses of the opponent. Only in this way can his actions become more efficient. However, it is not easy to do this. After the Red Skull burned all the magical products, it became extremely difficult to understand these magical things. Eric also did not have the ability to steal the information about witchcraft from Dr. Doom books, so he could only read one step at a time. After spending several years, Eric wrote a notebook based on his own experiences, which densely recorded the dark creatures and monsters he had personally killed over the years. Eric not only summarized the behaviors and habits of those creatures, but also described in detail the means of dealing with them and their weaknesses. All of this was information he had constantly explored through his own insights between life and death. At the same time, because of his continuous killings in the Wasteland, his name as a super killer is becoming more and more famous. People began to praise this hero who slaughtered monsters, and many mercenaries who licked blood on the tip of their swords also became familiar with him, because for those mercenaries, they only faced their employers and targets, but Eric faced it's those terrifying monsters. In the Dark Ages, people with big fists will always be treated with courtesy, and this is absolutely true for Eric. After gaining huge fame, Eric also gained his own love. That was after an operation to hunt ghouls ended. Eric dragged his tired body to the Leisure Tavern, which was a tavern that specifically provided services to mercenaries. Eric was a frequent visitor here. As soon as he entered, he was applauded by everyone in the tavern. Eric took the wine glass handed to him by the tavern owner, and soon mingled lively with the others. It was also on that day that he saw a woman with red hair among the mercenaries. Eric once thought that he lived only for revenge in his life, and a person like him was not worthy of love, but he had to admit that after he saw that woman, his heart suddenly felt a little throbbing. He fell in love with her. The woman's name was Weiya, the leader of a small mercenary group. Although she had just arrived here, she had already heard about Eric's bravery. Correspondingly, she also fell in love with this evil-killing hero. But the dull Eric doesn't know how to face this relationship. He has never been in contact with a woman, let alone developed a relationship with anyone. So facing Weiya's love, Eric could only bury it deeply in his heart. Everyone knows that when a woman falls in love with someone, her actions are crazy. Eric did not dare to accept such a heavy amount of love casually, let alone make a promise to Weiya. After that, Eric did not even dare to appear in front of Weiya again. It's hard to imagine that a hero who has hunted countless monsters would be afraid of a woman. The matter between Eric and Weiya has always been the most pleasant drunken chat among the mercenaries. They like to see the paralyzed Eric's face turn red when talking about Weiya. They also like to see Weiya. Because Eric can't be found drunkenly in the pub. For them, these things are undoubtedly the happiest time every day. A brother with a good relationship also advised Eric that just hiding will not solve the problem. If he wants to make the relationship clear, he must face the relationship. And Eric also understood this. He decided to explain everything clearly to Weiya after he solved the matter at hand. In Osborne City, the remaining light of the setting sun slowly casts down. The shadow of the wall gradually shifted, passing over one slender and tall wooden pole after another. Eric faced the direction of the setting sun. Die without peace of mind.